Alec, I've just been reading your book. Why don't you tell me a bit about your story?
Frankly, wasn't even planning to write a book. What was happening was I was having trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. And so one morning I was up at about 4 something in the morning, and I sat at my desk and I started to write. I thought I was actually writing a journal to myself to sort of try to piece together what had happened. And just the short version of what had happened is that I was a professor and I ran a center that investigated wrongful convictions and false accusations, and we had set some people free who had been falsely or wrongfully convicted. But then I found myself on the other side, and I found myself suddenly being accused of mistreating some of my students and staffers. The attack was led by a former employee whom I had let go. And what was put out there on the internet was wildly false. So if you looked at what was on the internet, you would think that this had something to do with some sort of sexual misconduct. But the actual complaints that were filed with the university, none of it had to do with any kind of sexual interaction. They were a hodgepodge of complaints. Just to give you a few examples, there was several students who complained about their grades. So they said one student wanted an A minus instead of a B plus 7 years earlier. And by the way, I gave that student the A minus 7 years ago, but she was still angry about it. There were several students who complained about the chair that they sat in my office. This was a futon chair that my small children would sit in when they came to visit my office, and they would color. Well, some of the students, or several of the students, complained that this futon chair was slightly lower to the ground than my chair, and they called it a power differential. They actually used the same language, this power differential, that their chair was slightly lower to the ground than my chair. By the way, you can't make any college student sit in any particular chair. They're going to sit where they want to sit in your office. And I had a lot of other chairs in my office. I threw that futon chair in a dumpster after this. And then there was another example, that just to give you one more example, a student who said that I had mocked her foreign accent while on a reporting trip to Florida. Well, first of all, my mother speaks with a foreign accent, but beyond that, I checked my records, and I wasn't in the state of Florida when this student said that I mocked her accent. But none of this mattered. By the way, I fought this for several months, but in the end, I was never sanctioned. I was never fired. I voluntarily resigned because it was such an ordeal and trauma for my family. My father tried to commit suicide in the midst of this. There was a time during this period when I wanted to end my life. It was a terrible trauma for my children and for my family, and I just wanted it to end, and I walked away from it all. But I can tell you that what we're talking about really is cancel culture. This was an earlier form of it back in 2018, but as it was then, right now, it doesn't matter. What it takes is an accusation or accusations, and once they're put out there, your life is utterly destroyed, and that's what happened to me.
I mean, it's an incredible story. In fact, you open your book with, you learning that your father has taken, what I guess was an attempted overdose of sleeping pills. Thankfully, it didn't work out that way, and he made it through. But, it's quite an incredible story, kind of to see it sort of evolve from that point.
Well, I have to tell you, living it was surreal, because when you feel your whole life is collapsing on itself, and then you get a phone call that your father has tried to commit suicide, I got on an airplane right away and went to New York to see my father. Actually, I went to pick up some of his things at his apartment. It was like visiting a crime scene, a bloody crime scene. And then I went to see him at the hospital, and it wasn't quite clear whether he was going to make it. And he didn't recognize me when he came to, but I stayed up all night by his bed, to make sure that he got through the night, and he did, and he survived it, and thankfully he's better today. But it was a terrible time for the whole family, and that's one of the things that people don't understand about cancel culture. It's often said by those who are doing the attacking that what's the big deal? You're just getting this person's job removed. But it's much worse than that. It's a calamity for not just the individual who's being canceled, but for their children, their family, and I would say to some degree the community in which they live. I mean, for me, as I said, I had been actually running a center investigating wrongful convictions and false accusations, which is somewhat ironic. But to some degree, the fact that I was canceled hurt the very people that I was trying to help, because that center collapsed and went away, and it doesn't exist anymore in that form. I continue to help inmates who are falsely accused or wrongfully convicted. I do that on my own time, though. But I feel bad that there's no longer that center there that allows to help people who need help. And that was another sort of collateral damage from all of these attacks.
Well, and part of it, I mean, you kind of go through a list, but it becomes pretty apparent that, I guess your father did what he did because to some extent, maybe he believed the accusations. And I think you wrote that he actually made a point of leaving you out in his will. So these accusations had really gotten to him. And then you also talk about all sorts of other people that you had known for perhaps 20 years that just basically disappeared from your life in an instant.
Well, just to correct the record about my father, is that we'd actually been somewhat estranged before all of this happened. And one of the silver linings of my own destruction was that my father and I actually became much closer afterwards, after my destruction and after his attempted suicide. We've become very close, and I talk to him all the time, and that wasn't the case beforehand. I think it's hard to say exactly, and I don't want to speak for him as far as why he did what he did. And I have to say, I often wonder why does anyone attempt to take their own life? And I think it's always a complicated mixture of things that may be hard to understand. But you're absolutely right that when this happened, I found myself a pariah wherever I went in virtually every walk of my life. I don't even know where to start. My therapist abandoned me. My literary agent abandoned me. My publisher abandoned me. Colleagues and friends disappeared. I was even in the neighborhood where I lived, I felt a little bit like, Quasimodo, which is that there was a lot of disdain, rather publicly directed at me. And, it's a strange thing when you're canceled. I would describe it as a 360 suffocation, actually. So you're destroyed professionally, which is, a good part of your life, but you're also destroyed socially. So you're supposed to be cast out completely and not allowed to come back into society. And that's sort of how it felt. I kind of jokingly call it the gift that keeps giving, because I've actually talked to many people who have been canceled throughout the United States and in other countries, even in different walks of life, scientists, business people, and others. And one of the common denominators is that they say they have really struggled to find their way back. In other words, how are they going to pay for their children's life insurance or health insurance? How are they going to, make a living? How are they going to move forward with their life when their career is destroyed and they have no way to make any money? Emotionally, it's actually devastating for those who go through this. And so, it's much worse than it's portrayed to a large degree in the media. And I think that's important for people to know, because it's something that's happening all over the country.
So you've just watched a clip from an American thought leader's interview, and as you probably know, I pour my heart and soul into these. YouTube has been censoring some entirely mainstream videos lately, including things like Florida Governor DeSantis's coronavirus roundtable. We've even had some of our own videos removed from YouTube for no clear reason whatsoever. And frankly, I don't find this to be appropriate. I don't find this to be acceptable. I don't want to be sitting around thinking what YouTube may or may not feel like they want to censor. And beyond that even, YouTube has demonetized us for the past 2 months. Ostensibly, we're working to resolve the issue, but our hopes are kind of fading when it comes to this. So what is our response to this? Well, we've started our own platform, Epoch TV. Now, Epoch TV is the premium Epoch Times video platform. It's got American thought leaders, but it also has The Larry Elder Show and Crossroads with Joshua Phillip and a number of other programs. So you can get Epoch TV for this low introductory rate of $4.99 a month. And in so doing, you're actually supporting the Epoch Times as an organization. You're supporting uncensored news. You're supporting groundbreaking investigative reporting. And you're supporting these deep dive interviews that I love doing so much. Please join us.